Hi, I'm Jackie Tantillo, and this is Should Have Listened to My Mother. So great to be back with another illuminating conversation. Hope everyone's had a good week. As you know, we recently won a 2024 People's Choice Podcast Award for Best in the Society and Culture category, plus nominations for Best Female-Hosted Podcast and Best in Kids and Family. Thank you again. Without your help and support, it would never have happened. If you have any questions or inquiries about the show, you can email us at SHLTMMpodcast@gmail.com. We love to hear from you. It's such a pleasure to present a new conversation where my guest shares insight as to their relationship with their mom. Regardless of your career, socioeconomic status, beliefs, gender, etc., the relationship with one's mother has a huge impact on who you become as a person. The question, are you who you are today because of or in spite of your mother, garners a different response from everyone. And I like to include the significance of any and all female role models because, as we know, they often become a surrogate mother. Henry Woodman is joining us this week. He considers himself a hedonistic and opportunistic entrepreneur. Henry believes personal and professional business opportunities present themselves. They generally find you, he says. A little bit about Henry. In 1976, at 16, Henry's dad suggested he, his brother, and some friends traveled to Honduras to search for lost treasure. They barely made it out alive, but he learned many valuable lessons, even though they never did find their treasure. He started a video game business as a college student and eventually sold it to pay bills. He produced travel films and traveled around the world. In the late 80s, early 90s, he became a TV exec producer of a young dating game show in Chile after the dictatorship had collapsed. Henry moved on to non-linear editing systems, producing CD-ROMs with virtual tours for the travel industry, and he got his MBA in his 50s, and so much more. And when I contacted Henry, his response was interesting concept. I'm in. I'll say Mom was a huge influence, but more in a what not to do kind of way. Of course, there were plenty of positives, but for the most part, the motivations were to avoid some of the things in her life. That said, Henry Woodman, welcome to Should Have Listened to My Mother.
Thank you, Jackie. What an awesome intro. And by the way, kudos on all those wonderful accolades.
Oh, thank you very much. I still can't believe it. It's pretty cool. It's pretty
That's
amazing.
Awesome. Yeah. It's I who should be asking you about your mother.
Oh, well, that's another whole conversation. And people keep asking me that. So maybe I should get some, because I'm one of 7 kids. I was thinking maybe we could get a couple of the siblings on and just talk about Linda, who's our mom. And
there you go.
She was pretty spectacular. But thanks for asking. Yep. So where did you grow up?
So I was born and for the most part raised in Miami, Florida.
Okay. And is that where your mom hailed from?
No, my mom was born in Germany, raised in Holland, and then eventually moved to the U.S., and where she married my dad. They, for some reason, found each other in Yuma, Arizona, and ended up in South Florida.
Did her family immigrate to the U.S.? Were they fleeing something?
Sort of. She was the product of the Jews leaving Germany. She was a German Jew, and her family, as a young girl, had left during the rise of Hitler and went into hiding in Holland. So her life had a fairly dramatic shift from childhood, where I think a lot of entitlement to the suffering and the hiding and the sort of shame of the Jewish tradition, I think.
Wow. And she was what age when they came to the U.S.? In the 40s, in the 1940s,
Yeah,
mid-40s.
yeah, exactly. She was born in 1933, so it would have been a 6 or 7 year old where most of this started cropping up. So yeah, and at a very young age.
Wow. So that could explain what you're about to tell us about your mom a little bit. Maybe not.
Without a doubt.
Without a
Without a doubt.
doubt.
And yeah, and to finish the conversation, yeah, so her parents, my grandparents, had split up during all of this. Evidently, my grandfather had run off with one of the housekeepers, and my grandmother, her mother, went into hiding and eventually was a spy for the Allies and tried to get some information. So it was quite
Wow.
the childhood.
Wow, that's pretty crazy cool. And traumatic. I mean, my gosh, still today
Yeah,
with what's going on
yeah,
in the world, the Jews have
yeah.
suffered tremendously, as have many other cultures. That's a very young age to
I was
have
going
your
to say,
life turned
without
around.
a doubt, it had a profound effect on her entire life.
So, what was it like for her as a teen, a young adult? Was she able to kind of pretend that none of this affected her, or what was her upbringing like?
No, I think that more than not, she looked at it as a victim, right? She felt that she was robbed of her childhood, and it was victimizing that all of this was taken away, and she deserved more. And I think most of her life was as a victim, and everybody was out to get her, and it was a cold, cruel world, and I need to take and get whatever I can in order to survive,
Oh, that can get in your way, though, can it?
without a doubt.
Your mother's name is Margo, by the way. I always
Yes,
like to refer to her. So,
Margo.
were there siblings?
Yes, she had one sister, Evelyn, who was a couple of years younger. And ironically, my mom passed a few years ago, but she would have been 91 just a few days ago.
So she had to take care, in theory, she had to take care of Evelyn, right, through all this transition and keeping an eye on her younger sister.
Yeah, I think so. I think they both had sort of the sort of pact to survive. And, I think she being the older one, I think it affected her more profoundly than her sister.
Where or how did this manifest more, or how did it rear its ugly head when it came time for you to come into the picture?
So, as a kid, you really don't realize some of what's happening in the parental guidance until you get older and you look back and go, wow, that was kind of dysfunctional, or that was weird. Because, when my mom was growing up, I think this sense of having missed out or being robbed, and the lack of the victimization thing, and the lack of getting what she thought she deserved, came through the whole life. And so she would have this idea that she would do whatever she needed to do in order to have the appearance of somebody successful or wealthy. And I think that manifested itself in us looking at the world and saying, well, there are more to it than just the superficial part of it. When we were kids, we would have to multiple sports and horseback riding and tennis and speak multiple languages and all of this because on the surface, we looked perfect, right?
Oh my gosh, she really went out of her way to make you look good.
Yeah, yeah. And you listen, a lot of that, you look back and you go, boy, it was challenging then, but some of it you're thankful for. I mean, as a kid, you don't want to sit there and say, I got to speak Spanish here and I got to speak French there and I got to speak English in school. And what good is it? This is never going to do me any good, right? You don't realize that it will.
Sure.
And, there were other things that she felt that, you have to have this facade of this perfect human because it's all about how you look. It doesn't matter what's on the inside, if you will.
So, was it going back to her experience as a child and being Jewish? Was she trying to hide her Judaism?
Absolutely.
It was the fear still of
Yeah.
wanting to fit in and
Without a doubt. I mean, listen, I did not even know I was of Jewish descent until I was 18 years old. I was a freshman in college. I had thought my grandfather, her father, who had run off with the housekeeper, I thought he was dead.
That's
You
another
know,
story. You're going to have to come back
yeah,
into
that
that
is
one.
another. That's exactly right.
And I don't mean
I
to
thought
joke
he,
here, so go ahead.
yeah, I thought he was dead, because, when she married my father, she didn't tell him she was Jewish. She just kept it sort of as a secret and, of course, didn't tell the kids. And, my parents then got divorced when I was 5. And, through my whole life, I just never gave it a second thought. Religion wasn't a part of our upbringing until she said, yes, your grandfather, he's alive and he's in LA. Of course, I went to college in Arizona and I went, oh my God, he's in LA. I have a grandfather,
Wow.
So the first meeting was as a teenager meeting your grandfather at 18. It was kind of surreal.
Did she prevent you from seeing him?
No. I think to your point, she was embarrassed about the whole Judaism thing and, the Jews being persecuted. She didn't want to have any part of that. She denied her heritage. And as a result, she just didn't admit it to herself or to anybody else. And part of that story that she created for herself, I guess she was angry with her father as well, because he left her and her mom and ran off with, they had multiple housekeepers, but the head housekeeper, as she calls her, the maid. But I think she just denied his existence and it was easier to say he died, right? So she was in denial about that too.
Well, he took off and left them hanging.
Exactly.
So I get that. So this is multi-layers of complicated past. Did she change her last name before she met your dad?
When she met, I don't think she changed it. I don't believe so. I mean, it was always Rose, Margo Rose. And then when she got married to my father, obviously she changed the last name.
Mm-hmm. No. So it wasn't ghosts in the closet. It was just, she never mentioned it and everything was fine. If she didn't bring it up and talk about it, then it was fine.
Yeah, I think that's probably more true than not. And if not mentioning it, when there was a mention of her father, he died, it's a victim of the war.
Right.
Okay. That was the end of the story. So nobody beyond that gave it a second thought because they separated, he died. Okay, thank you, goodbye, So there wasn't need for a discussion. Where is he? Why aren't you talking to him? What's going on?
Right. It was the simplest and best answer at the time for her to give. So was your home life tumultuous, or was she always on to be happy and perfect in the house and outside the house?
Well, I think the happy and perfect in and out, the superficialness of it was part of what made the challenges in the house because, you would be told to do and say things that were incongruent with the reality you lived in, and there were things that she wanted but couldn't afford, so she stole them, right? And she had her children steal as well, me being one of them. So when you're a kid and you realize, somehow you don't give it a thought, and then when you get old enough and you realize, wow, you know what, this is not right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you share this with your brother?
Oh, absolutely. I had an older brother, 10 and a half months older, and a younger sister, 13 months younger. So I was right in the middle. And of course, we all experienced this as our little clan. There's nobody else really we could talk to but ourselves.
Right. Did it get really, really bad, or this was just the life that she lived until she passed?
So I guess you would have to define really, really bad because...
Oh my God. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. She was pretty good. She was very smart. So she didn't get caught, but she was caught a couple of times. She was in jail for a couple of years. So
for
I guess
years.
You can define that. Yeah, you can define that as bad.
Well, larceny, not petty Not stealing a
No,
watch or something. She was
no, yeah, it was
grand larceny. She,
yeah,
oh my gosh.
yeah.
Wow. And how old were you when she was in jail?
I was 16.
Did she ever have anyone that she could confide in or support? What was her mother doing when she
So
was experiencing all
yeah,
this behavior?
yeah, she also had a sort of love-hate relationship with her mother. Her mother also lived in Los Angeles. And I don't think that she confided in the mother. She had a lot of resentment towards her parents. And I think the whole childhood in and of itself, her excuse in life was, the victim mindset. The world was out to get me. I didn't get my fair share. I want what I deserve. My mom, she's, a lot, she really did in large part have this relationship where she would talk to her mom, and it seemed like they had a nice relationship. But then when they weren't talking together and she would talk to her children, there was a lot of negativity towards her mother.
What were some of the positive things she taught you or shared with you?
Well, I think the positive for, when I look back is mostly what not to do, right? And, when things are that challenging for a kid and you're told to lie to somebody or you're told to steal something, and you come to the realization that not just morally and ethically but legally and all kinds of reasons, that just doesn't make sense, and you don't really understand why. And the why is the superficial, because I was a victim and I deserve it and the world owes me, right? It was not about us, but it was about us. We needed to succeed and we needed to look good and we needed to do these things. And in order to do that, the superficial things, whether it's material things or speaking languages or traveling and things like that, was paramount. So, when you're younger, you don't really realize, and, I was a very introverted and shy kid, so I never realized what all of that meant until, I started to open my eyes and go, wait, this is not right. And you know what? It's nobody I can really talk to about this except my brother and my sister.
Right. To confide in each other. Like, is there something wrong with what she's asking us to do?
Right.
Wow. So she never
Well,
had did she have girlfriend? And she kept this secret from everybody. No one but you, the siblings, knew. Her children knew what was going on.
pretty much. I think her sister knew as well. I mean, when they were younger, they were forced to beg, borrow, and steal to survive. And I think that just carried on to adulthood, more so for my mother than her younger sister, my aunt. So I'm pretty sure my aunt was aware. I don't think she knew the depth of some of the behavior, but I don't think she really talked to anybody and said, "Hey, listen, there's what's going on." It wasn't that at all. It was just, look at my great life, look at all these things that I have and I've accomplished, and look at my wonderful kids. Aren't they perfect?
Oh my gosh. Did you go visit her in prison?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that must have left a lasting impression.
Yeah, I think that more than anything else, that and the fact that you realize this is not a life that you want to live, one. Two, eventually, and now I would imagine more so than ever, you're gonna get caught, right? This can't persist.
Yeah, eventually catches up with you. Did she ever apologize for her behavior?
Yeah, I think in her way, I mean, and I also give her the benefit of the doubt. My brother and sister and I say, listen, she tried and did the best she can with what she had, the tools and the knowledge. She didn't want to work because that would mean, in her mindset, time away from the kids. From an early age, she was divorced, so she didn't really have the money to live the way she wanted to. My dad did give her alimony money, but it wasn't enough. It was never enough, right? And that was kind of the mindset. It's never enough. And, it kind of led to a little bit of hoarding as well. So, things were, I need more. And that material stuff gives me security.
Wow. So all this PTSD, as we so openly speak about today, really monopolized her life.
Without a doubt.
Did you confide in your dad?
Yeah, he knew, this was early on when they were married. They would travel to Europe as two young lovers, and they would do a little nefarious stealing and stuff, but nothing.
The two of them together did it.
Yeah.
Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
yeah, I mean, like go in and steal stuff at stores to feed themselves and things like that.
Okay.
I don't think it was any master plot to survive. It was just sort of a happy-go-lucky thing. Mm-hmm. And of course, the clashing happened early on and they got divorced. So he knew all along. And he also knew his kids were sort of in the middle of this. She had custody, but we would see him on the weekends and stuff.
So he didn't say, enough of this, you're coming to live with me.
No.
Would you have wanted to live with him?
Probably.
If it were possible?
At some point, when I was older and I realized it was sort of chaotic at my mom's house, I up and left and I said, I'm moving to Dad's. And I did at 15, right? And because it got a little bit crazy. And so I had moved, and then soon after that was when she was imprisoned.
I'm so sorry. Talking about it is really important. You and I were speaking before we started the interview, and these conversations can possibly help somebody else who's experiencing. We don't have to be mistreated in order to survive. There is help out there, especially these days, which is fortunate for so many.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I think that when one gets old enough and you look back on the life and you say, okay, there are a couple of directions this could have gone, right? I could have followed in those footsteps and become the victim and, realized the world I deserve more and the world needs to deliver, and I'm just going to take. Or I realize, there's a better way to find happiness, and it's not superficially, but it's to go out and do something more in line with morals and ethics that I would think are right,
but
right? Doing the right thing, if you will.
Where did you get that instinct from? Who did you get that instinct from?
Well, I think the instinct comes from seeing this is not what I want to do.
Right. Again, back to
I mean, you don't want to see police come to the house. You don't want to be lying to people about things, and there was a time, as a story will go, where, as a young kid, she would say, okay, take this and walk out of the store, right? And of course, we'd walk out of the store, and if we were caught, the manager or somebody would come up and say, he's walking out. And she says, oh my God. And she would smack me across the face and say, damn it, I told you, you don't take those unless we pay for them, right? So who's going to blame the mother? Yeah. Who's going to blame the mother for some dumb kid walking out with stuff unbeknownst to him that it wasn't paid for, right? So, you realize.
Did you stand up for yourself when you got away from the store?
No.
You could never say a word.
Of course not.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's ancient past at this point.
But you had a moral compass, and you and your siblings all three of you have what we call a normal life. You're not thieves or robbers, any of you. Yeah. So I applaud that. The moral compass in you really, you went toward the light, which is fantastic. Did she ever say, I know you said she kind of sort of in her own way apologized when you would speak to her in prison, but did she ever I'm going to try and do better? Did she get it that she was sick or ill?
Honestly, I think she knew in her heart, but I don't think that she truly wanted to admit it, because it was always, there was a reason in her mind. I was victimized. I deserved this. And as a result, that was my behavior. And my brother and my sister and I would say to her, these were pretty shitty things. And she said, yes, I know, but, and there's a but there that was, I didn't really know any other way type answer. And so for her, living in a one-bedroom apartment and getting by and not having to steal was not acceptable. You had to be in a 5-bedroom house on 2 acres of land and have all these things and travel, but it was all fake, if you will.
Right. Wowie, Kazowie, did she ever ask you how you are? Did she ever have dreams for you? Did she encourage you to not be like her?
I think in her heart, she probably would have. I mean, she was very narcissistic. And so it was in large part all about her, and her quote unquote perfect children were essentially a reflection of her as well. Right.
Very important.
So, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm the perfect person. I got the perfect children. I have the perfect life. Look, from the outside, sure did look nice. So I don't think that she ever really sort of looked at, I have to apologize. I know it was wrong. It was like, listen, I believe it was wrong, but I didn't have many options. This was the cards that I was dealt, and this was, my only option. So I did the best I could.
And was she affectionate? Did she hug you? Was it authentic? If she ever was sympathetic toward anything you were going through? My gosh.
Yeah, those are 2 good questions, because yes, she was affectionate, but I don't think it was as genuine as you would have wanted it to be.
Oh, that makes it worse.
You know what I mean? It's
it's horrible. I keep digging here. I'm trying to see the light in something good in her.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of light. I mean, listen, both my brother and sister and all of us have turned out really well, and we've got wonderful and successful and happy lives and families. But I think that when you're come here, give your mother a hug, and you're like, oh shit, I would never want to do that to my daughter. Force myself to, come here and force yourself to give me attention and affection. Act like you love me.
Oh boy.
I think those were the things that you sort of resent as you look back.
So she was your greatest teacher. She gave you a lot.
By far, yeah.
By far.
Without a doubt.
Wow.
And, I think the tenacity and resilience, even if they were nefarious activities, she was very resilient in her survival skills.
Yeah. But it again, yes, she was traumatized, but it doesn't excuse her behavior, and especially when you become a parent, right? But when someone is sick, it's a different equation.
Yeah. I mean, let's be honest. There were millions of Holocaust survivors,
Yeah.
Some of them were dramatically traumatized, without a doubt. And some of them came through it looking at the world differently and with a sort of a healthy disposition. I think in large part, it depends on how you get over it, if you will. And I don't mean like get over it, like let's move on, but how you deal with it and move forward and say, okay, I understand this happened and this was the reason, as opposed to the world owes me and I'm going to get my fair share.
Yeah, because that doesn't ever really work out that way. So many Holocaust survivors have used their experience to better themselves and to better the world, to teach what happened and to not let it hopefully ever happen again, right? That's an example of how some people turn their lives around.
Absolutely. And the fact that she was young, I think, also played into that mental printing as, a child having to go from, everything, if you will, to hiding and sort of begging for food was fairly impactful and traumatic for a kid growing emotionally and mentally.
No doubt.
It's funny because I think everybody, not just my mother, all kinds of people, nobody goes through and they go, oh my God, my childhood. And nobody had the perfect childhood unless you define what perfect is, right? But I think many of us are the product of what we take away from that childhood. And if whether it's I was encouraged to be a resilient and entrepreneurial person, or I was encouraged to say don't go that path and find a more equitable path, right? Which is eventually what happened.
Well, that's wonderful philosophy for
Yeah.
a business owner, right? To be open to business opportunities coming to you and thinking of the big picture. Perhaps because of your childhood experiences, you were willing to take more risks.
I think it probably played a part. I mean, when I tell people that things happen, it's really because your eyes are open to it. We don't all sit in a cocoon and not see what's going on, right? And so I'll give you a perfect example. In college, I'm a freshman, a sophomore in my second year, and I'm addicted to Pac-Man, right? I love video games, and I'm sitting in a laundromat with a pocket full of quarters, and I'm bored out of my mind. I don't want to study. I want to play Pac-Man. And of course, there's no Pac-Man. And so I call every laundromat in Tucson, instead of thinking, oh my God, somebody should do something. Instead of that, I call every laundromat and they all say, no, we don't have any. And I thought, well, I'd ask a couple, well, do you want one? I'll share the revenue with you. And I don't know where I was going to get the money, but I thought, what a great little idea. And so by the time I graduated college, that was my little niche. I had video games and laundromats, and they were crappy. They were really horrible machines, but I'd move them around every couple of weeks, and people would go, finally, now a new machine. But I had a captive audience. They had a pocket full of quarters, right?
Yep.
And so those are the types of things. And then the game show in Chile was because, Pinochet had left his dictatorship. The democracy added new television stations. I was producing travel films, and I realized, wow, I could go to Chile and produce a game show because there's new networks that have a real deep need for content.
Your right time, right place, right perspective.
And then from there, my last business, if you go to any travel website and you book a hotel, you see pictures of the hotels. That would have come from my business, because going from, virtual tours to distributing virtual tours to realizing, hey, that technology gave you the rate and the availability, but there were no pictures. So maybe we help with the managing and the sizing and the tagging and the delivery of the imagery. And so, you kind of, I guess, make do as opposed to accepting and being a victim and saying, you know what, I'm not going to accept this as it is. I'm going to find a way through it.
Absolutely. It's a great attitude for life, for everything, not just work. It's for personal relationships, professional relationships, and it just keeps the creative juices flowing and moving in a positive direction. And your current project, you published your father's book that he wrote, The Reincarnation of Marie, A Love Reborn in Paris from the Pages of History. He wrote that 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And you're trying to get it made into a TV series.
I bought the rights. 40 years later, I published the book. My dad passed 14 years ago. I published the book, and now we're developing the concept of the book, doing a deeper dive for a TV series. There you go.
Oh, that's so cool.
Stay tuned.
Henry Woodman, your mother, Margo, I hope she's completely at peace and is living a perfectly amazing life wherever she may be.
Likewise.
And we will be back next week with another episode of Should Have Listened to My Mother.